Alright, so now I have my 3 samples taped to the board and I'm ready to start actually painting the pear. And I'm going to start by wetting the pear with just plain clean water. And I want to make sure that I stay within my lines. I'm using this is a number 6 round brush. I could use something a little bigger just to cover more ground. This is fine as well. And again, I don't want to wet the stem. I just want to wet the pear itself. And I don't want to wet the cast shadow either. This water is slightly dirty, so you can see it a little bit. All right, so I've got that all wet. So now I'm ready to start on the actual colors of the pear, and I'm going to start with the highlights. And because the surface is wet, when I touch the paint down to the surface, it's going to bleed a little bit, which is great. There are 2 areas of highlight. There's one up there, and then there's one down here on the skinnier part of the pear. So I just want to get 2 little areas of color, and that is a yellow ochre. And now I'm going to be working with the color of the complement of the local color. And the local color of the pear is green. It's a green pear. And the complement is actually alizarin crimson or red. And I'm going to do a dotted line of alizarin crimson along the edge of the pear where it sits against the shadow. So I know you're probably wondering, well, when is this going to get to be a green pear if all I've done is put yellow and red in there? It seems kind of contrary, but it's actually going to be a green pear. And now that I have my highlight and my complement shadow color, now I'm ready to work with the actual local color of the pear, which is, I'm using a mixture of the Hooker's green. You can see this is a little bit yellower because I've also added some yellow ochre to it. So this is actually a mixture that I made ahead of time of Hooker's green and yellow ochre together. And now I'm going to be flooding in this mixture over the pear. Now again, remember the surface is wet. You got to work while it's still wet, otherwise you're going to have a dry pear, and you don't want that because then that color is not going to move across the surface. So I'm going to be working right over the top of my complement, but I want to allow my highlight to stay. I don't want to lose my highlights. I want to keep those. So I'm not going to paint over my lovely yellow highlights, but I am going to fill this rest of this area and go right over my complement at the bottom edge. Now what that's going to do, it's going to allow the green and red to mix together. And as you know from our color studies, green and red are complementary colors. So they are going to make a natural shadow tone, which is...
I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to the Mason High School Parent-Teacher Conferences here in the 2nd semester. Our Parent-Teacher Conferences are over this evening at 7:30 p.m. Again, we thank you for coming in for conferences. If you didn't get a chance to speak with some teachers that you'd like to speak with, please contact the front office tomorrow and we can set up appointments to make that happen. Again, thank you for attending our conferences. They are finishing here at 7:30 this evening. Please drive safely home. Thank you.
So now my pear is completely dry and I'm ready to create the next step, which is going to include some spatter technique over this area of the pear to create the skin texture. And this spatter tool is very interesting. It has this there's this metal post that sticks out of this wooden spool that can swivel and turn around the handle. It also has a brush on the end, and the goal is that this metal piece goes into the brush, and then you turn the round end of the handle so that the bristles bristle against that metal pole and spray the paint onto the paper. Now if you turn it this way and you can see that metal pole, you're going to be spattering your face. So you want to make sure that when you're turning it that the bristles are hiding the post-its underneath, so that it's spattering the paper. Now the other thing you need to know about this is if you hold it up in the air away from the paper, you're going to spatter like the kid across from you and the kids next to you. So you have to hold it as close to the paper without touching it as possible and turn slowly, because you don't need a whole lot. You're going to be able to get a lot of color just from a very slow spatter. You don't even need to do a full rotation of the handle to get a nice amount of spatter. So in order to spatter what we want without spattering the rest of our picture, we need to create a mask that's going to mask off everything except the area that we want the spatter to occur. So the way to do that is you're going to get a small piece of newsprint paper. This has something on, some ink on it. It's okay, it doesn't matter because we're just going to be using this as a mask. And you want to fold it in half. It doesn't have to be pretty. And fold it in half again. And then this is going to allow us to create a quick mask. And I'm going to tear an irregular, I don't want it smooth and rounded, an irregular shape. Now again, I'm going to think about it as like a quarter of the pear's, the shape that I want to be spattered. So when I open this, that it's going to mask out the section of the pear that I want the spatter to occur on. So I'm going to put it about there. Now you can see the rest of my paper is protected. Lift up my palette so that goes underneath. So the rest of my paper is protected. I'm only going to get the spatter in the zone where I want the spatter to be. So I've got my spatter tool ready, and I've actually prepared the burnt umber, which is the color that I would like to work with for my spattering. And I want to make sure that that color is very mixed and ready. I want it very wet. It's got to make sure that it's really actually going to stick to the spatter tool so that it releases onto the paper. So I'm going to slide the spool down to apply it, and I'm just going to dip these bristles right into the tray, right into my palette spot for that color. I'm going to smash it in there. Now you can't see the paint on there, but it's on there. It's getting on there. All right, so I've got some paint on there. And now I'm going to insert the wooden post, or this metal post, into the spool. I'm going to hold it very close to the paper surface and turn the handle. You can see the spatter showing up there. So that's about all I need. I don't need a whole lot. And I'm going to slide the post back down. And now all I have to do is lift my mask away, and I've got this nice little spattering of color on my pear skin, which is exactly what I wanted. So now, before I can pass this to the next person, I'm going to need to make sure that I dip it directly into the water, in my water bowl, wash it around, and then make sure that you squeeze the spatter tool out with a paper towel before you pass it on, because it'll be too wet to work with otherwise. So that's the spatter step, and we'll be moving on to cast shadow soon. So now I'm ready to apply the cast shadow for my pear, and I need to first create the color that I want to work with. And I've just taken some of the ultramarine blue, made a strong value puddle of it here, and I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to it. Now the nice thing about this combination is that they are near complements of each other, which is going to give me a really strong gray blue, which is what I want. I don't want necessarily a complete neutral, but you can see this is getting me to like a nice gray blue, and that is exactly the color that I want for my cast shadow. This is a pretty good concentrated effort as far as paint to water ratio. It's definitely a strong color. It is not watery in any way, as you can see by the intensity that's there. So my first step to apply the shadow color is to first wet the space. Now I've got to go around the stem, and I want to be careful because I don't want to bleed in any of this water into the pear itself, because I don't want it to change the shape of my pear. And I want to make sure that I'm adhering to my pencil line. But I also need this shadow area to be equally wet all the way around, so I can't dilly-dally, because if I take my time here, this could end up drying before I'm ready to apply the color, and that would not be what I want to happen. Now, as we've learned about shadows and cast shadows, you always want to make sure that it is darkest against the object, and as it moves away, the shadow moves away from the object, it gets lighter in value. So knowing that, I'm going to be playing with that ideal when I apply the color. All right, so I've got that nice and wet all the way across, nice and equally wet. So I'm going to tap my brush point down right along the edge of the shadow. Now if I did a brush stroke, it would end up getting the dark end, the darkest part on the end, and I would get a light value in between. So by touching multiple times, I'm going to be able to get some of the darker value to stay there. And if you have a spot where it's a little lighter, you can always just touch your brush down and to deepen that. Because I don't want to end up with just a dark spot on the end of where I'm applying. I want it to have darkness all along that edge. All right, so at this point I have a dark value all the way along the edge where the pear meets the shadow, and I just washed my brush, so it's now just a clean surface. And I'm just going to grab the edge of that and kind of blend it out toward the edge of the shadow area. Nope, I went a little out of my line there, but that's okay. And this time I can use long strokes to apply. And you may find that you want to blend out, like I might grab just a little bit of color to add to this to get it just a little bit more colored than the gray that I'm seeing there. But the goal is that I have my cast shadows darkest against the object and gets lighter as it moves away from the object, which is what I've got happening there. I feel like I need a little bit more dark gray in here, got a little lighter. So again, you can play along with that cast shadow tone and wash my brush out just a little bit to blend that. There. So now I'm going to allow that to dry, and the last step is to paint the stem, which I don't want to paint now because that area surrounding it is wet. So this is almost finished, just the stem to go. So the finishing step for our pear is to work on the stem. And my cast shadow is completely dry, so I can start to wet just the stem area. A little bit of fresh water, and I've changed to a very small brush. Then I'm going to work with a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to grab just a little bit of burnt umber. So I want to give a little bit of shadow line to the stem. I want that color strong enough to really show up. Just adding a little bit more dark to it. All right, and that is finished.